My ex-boyfriend saw something at my sister's wedding last month, and now everything I thought was solid has turned to sand. I thought he was just stirring up drama after 3 years of silence, but his words unlocked a lie so massive, it swallowed my entire childhood. I'm driving to confront the person who orchestrated the betrayal, but the worst part? I'm terrified I deserve it. Pardon me, a female voice murmured from immediately behind. I pivoted to confront an aged woman, her hair cropped short and gray, wearing spectacles. The individual trailing you. They've been shadowing you down every single passage. I casually looked backward. A tall gentleman with dark hair stood about 3 persons behind us, his gaze fixed upon his cellular phone, donning a sapphire coat, exactly as she had indicated. I inquired if she was absolutely certain, and she reaffirmed that she had observed him following my movements from the area designated for electronic devices to the section containing household provisions and subsequently to the literature department, consistently preserving the identical separation. I expressed my gratitude for her alerting me while endeavoring to maintain a facade of normalcy and surveying my surroundings for retail establishment security. At the teller, I completed my transaction swiftly, my attention focused on the blue-coated man. He remained in the queue, no longer observing me. Perhaps the woman was mistaken or perplexed. Nevertheless, I hastened to the parking area and placed my purchases into my vehicle more rapidly than was customary. During the drive returning to my residence, I continually monitored my rearview mirror. No sapphire garment, merely my imagination running riot. I drove into my housing complex and retrieved only the necessities: dairy liquid, ovums, sliced bread, deferring the remainder for a subsequent time. My mobile device rang as I unlocked the entrance to my domicile. Nathaniel, my former paramour from university, was calling after a 3-year period of incommunicado. When I answered, he explained that he was obligated to speak with me and requested a meeting. After deliberating momentarily, I consented to meet him at the green space adjacent to the public library on Wednesday. When Wednesday arrived, I reached the park a quarter of an hour ahead of schedule. I selected a bench close to the ornamental water feature. Nathaniel materialized at precisely 2 o'clock, wearing tinted lenses despite the overcast heavens. He embraced me uncomfortably and thanked me for agreeing to see him. He admitted he had been struggling to devise a method to approach me. I pointed out that he could have sent a text message initially, and he confessed he was uncertain I would reply. After removing his eyewear, he informed me he had witnessed something at my siblings' matrimonial ceremony the preceding month. Astonished, I queried how he was present at Anne's nuptials considering he was not extended an invitation. He clarified that his relative, Eugene, was acquainted with Troy, Anne's spouse, and he was Eugene's accompanying guest. When I asked why he had not offered a salutation, he disclosed it was because he had cited Sheila, my parent. I shook my head and stated that was not feasible since my mother was absent from the wedding and had passed away when I was a dozen years old. Nathaniel adamantly maintained that he recognized my mother's appearance from photographs and that the female seated at table number 8 was unquestionably her. Becoming distressed, I rose to my feet and pronounced this to be lunacy. I elucidated that my matriarch was deceased and I had attended her interment ceremony. He inquired if I had viewed her remains and I responded that it had been a sealed casket because she had perished in a vehicular collision. As I seized my handbag and commenced my departure, he shouted after me, asserting she had looked directly at him and acknowledged him from the era of our companionship. I drove immediately to Anne's dwelling across the metropolis, my hands tightly gripping the driving mechanism. She opened the entryway wearing loungewear despite the time being afternoon. I declared we required a discussion regarding mother and turned noticeably pale, inquiring about the subject of her. When I mentioned Nathaniel claiming he saw her at the matrimonial event, and poured herself a drink of chilled liquid and declared he must be under a misconception. I concurred that was my response to him as well, but added he seemed so utterly convinced. Anne settled herself at the dining counter and began to unveil the reality. She did not expire in that calamity. Father fabricated it. They were undergoing a marital dissolution and she paused. She deserted us. Dad could not cope with the facts. Therefore, he informed us she met her end. I found it unbelievable, mentioning there had been a funeral service. Anne clarified it was an unoccupied receptacle and that father had compensated the funeral director to cooperate with the deception. I exited without uttering another sound, driving without a specific destination until I found myself at father's residence. He opened the door and took one look at my expression. He instantly understood and had revealed the secret to me. When I asked how he could conceal the truth about such a matter, he extended an invitation for me to enter. "Your mother deserted us for another gentleman," Dad uttered. "I believed it would be simpler for you girls to believe she died a heroine rather than comprehend she chose to abandon us." When I started to question about all these years, he acknowledged he never anticipated her return, especially not to Anne's nuptials. I stayed with father for a duration of hours posing questions concerning mother, the falsehood, about what genuinely transpired. As the celestial orb descended, I navigated to the provision store, requiring a period of solitude. I meandered through the passageways, gathering random provisions. As I turned into the section for milk products, I became immobilized. A woman with familiar visual organs was examining the variety of fermented milk products. Older with different hair arrangement, but unmistakably my mother. Chapter 2, The Truth Unravels. The first thing I did was read the frantic texts from Anne and listen to the terse message from Dad. So, I published a narration about discovering that my supposedly deceased parent was in fact living. And goodness gracious, the responses exploded. Someone advised me to consult a legal practitioner. Someone else suggested I verify if I am legally acknowledged as my father's offspring. What in the world? And approximately 50 individuals counseled me to flee. She perceived me at the precise instant. Her hand seized up on a vessel of Greek-style yogurt. For around 10 seconds, we merely gazed at each other like two ruminants who had both perceived a discharge of a firearm. Then she replaced the yogurt, adjusted the shoulder strap of her pouch, and began traversing toward the egress. I pursued her, not in a sinister, secretive manner, but I literally ran lightly to close the gap. I cried out, "Mother," and she halted, but did not turn about. When I approached more closely, I could discern her shoulders were trembling. She rotated and I obtained a clear view of her visage. The identical verdant irises I observe in the reflecting surface every matutinal period. The same somewhat irregular nasal feature, but older, unquestionably, with lines surrounding her oral aperture I did not recall from the photographs father had concealed in the upper chamber. She inquired as to my well-being and I actually produced a sound of mirth. Like a peculiar frenzied cackle that caused other patrons to look in our direction. I declared I was exceptionally well. My thanks for asking. Just ascertained my late mother has been alive throughout this entire stretch of time. So indeed splendid. She flinched. Then she proposed we relocate to a different setting to converse. I considered refusing, about departing and allowing her to undergo the sensation of being forsaken. But I required explanations more than I desired trivial reprisal. We ended up at a 24-hour eatery, the type of establishment with adhesive menus and a waitress who addressed everyone as dearie. We occupied a seating compartment near the back portion. She placed an order for roasted bean beverage. I requested a carbonated sugar drink because I was not going to pretend this was some informal meeting over warm liquids. She commenced by stating she was unaware I would be at the nuptial event and I interrupted her. I informed her and extended an invitation to her. She nodded and explained Troy's parent had forwarded the summons to her current residential location months ago, and she had debated for multiple weeks before electing to attend. Current address, as though she had been residing somewhere consistently, a locale sufficiently near to receive correspondence about my sister's wedding. I asked where and she specified Harrisburg. Harrisburg, an hour-and-a-half's drive distance. For 13 cycles of the sun, she had been 90 minutes away. She declared she understood I was furious and I retorted, "No, I do not believe you truly grasp." I informed her I wept myself to slumber for 2 years convinced she was dead. I informed her I retained her picture beneath my cushion until I was 15. I informed her father was necessitated to secure psychological assistance for me because I was experiencing frightening nocturnal visions concerning motor vehicle mishaps. She began weeping at that point. Authentic tears, not the attractive sort. The server delivered our refreshments and retreated rapidly as though she perceived the psychological conflict transpiring. My mother stated she never intended for any of this to materialize and that it was meant to be transient. She explained she had departed from father because he was controlling, because she felt suppressed, because she required latitude to determine her self-identity. She asserted she was going to come back for us, for me and Anne. I asked when and she became silent. Then she acknowledged perhaps half a year after she left, father informed her that if she ever attempted to establish contact with us, he would ensure we would never desire to encounter her again. He would tell us she deserted us for illicit substances, for another male, for pecuniary gain. He stated he would completely turn us against her, so she simply surrendered. That's what I asked. She simply accepted it and proceeded with her existence. She insisted she did not move on and revealed she kept track of us through shared acquaintances. She was aware when I completed secondary education, when and was accepted into nursing instruction, when I obtained my employment, she presented me with her handset. She possessed photographs. Images of me from social media sites, from Anne's publicly accessible postings. Years of snapshots she had been compiling like some sort of digital keepsake compilation. It was eerie and sorrowful and made me more indignant somehow. I inquired about the man father claimed she left for, and her facial expression changed. She validated there was someone. His name was Timothy and he collaborated with her. They had been involved in an illicit relationship for approximately 4 months before she departed. At least father had not been untruthful about everything. She swiftly appended that Timothy and she did not succeed. It terminated within 12 months. She stated looking retrospectively she had made atrocious decisions, that she had been self-serving and unwise and youthful. She was 32 when she left. Not exactly a juvenile determining life's course. But here is where the situation becomes complicated. She informed me she attempted to connect once when I was 16. She dispatched a written communication to our former abode, but father returned it unopened. She tried telephoning from a new number, but father recognized her vocal sound and terminated the call. She asserted she even drove past my high school one day, but observed me laughing with companions and determined I appeared sufficiently content without her. I declared she did not possess the authority to make that judgment. She did not possess the right to decide from a car window whether I required my mother or not. She concurred. She stated she was a coward and that watching and get married, seeing how lovely and mature she was. Seeing me in the family portraits on Troy's parents' social media page, it shattered something within her. She recognized she had forfeited 13 years she could never recuperate. I inquired if she had other offspring and she responded negatively. I asked if she was married and she replied no. I asked what in the world she had been engaging in for 13 years and she stated working as an administrator, dwelling alone in a one-room apartment and regretting every single day of her miserable existence. The acrimony in her speech when she uttered miserable caused me to consider perhaps she was not fabricating about the remorse element. We sat there for probably a pair of hours. She narrated about her existence in Harrisburg, about her feline companion named Button, about how she volunteered at a charitable food distribution center on Saturdays, as though these ordinary particulars would somehow compensate for everything. I asked if and was aware she was living before the nuptials and my mother faltered. Then she confessed and had reached out to her 3 years prior. 3 years. And had been communicating with her for 36 months and never informed me. I sprang up so rapidly I overturned my carbonated drink. The server hurried over with paper towels. I left monetary notes on the surface and exited. My mother called after me, but I continued walking. I drove directly to Anne's apartment. It was almost 10 post-meridian, but I was indifferent. I banged aggressively on her entrance until she opened it. She took one look at my countenance and understood. She attempted to offer an explanation. She stated mother had discovered her on social media, that she had been apprehensive and puzzled, that she did not know how to convey the information to me. She asserted she had intended to safeguard me from experiencing pain once more. I inquired how secret conversations with our presumably deceased parent for 3 years constituted protecting me. Anne started weeping and stated mother had pleaded with her not to divulge anything until she was prepared. Prepared for what? I asked. Prepared to re-enter our lives when it was convenient for her. Anne revealed mother had been inquiring about me incessantly. What I was occupied with, if I was engaged in a romantic relationship with anyone, if I was content. Anne stated she had been providing her with updates because it seemed merciless not to. I informed and what felt merciless was lying directly to my face for 3 years. Every time we had supper, every festive occasion, every sisterly gathering where I would mention mother and become mournful, and had been cognizant of the truth and remained silent, and clutched my upper arm and asserted I did not comprehend the situation she was placed in. She clarified mother was delicate, that she had been undergoing psychological treatment, that she had attempted to terminate her existence twice after leaving us. Twice. Anne had been petrified that if she informed me I would reject mother and mother would attempt again. So I was expected to fake a joyful reunion to prevent our parent from inflicting harm upon herself. That is manipulation. Anne maintained that was not her intention, but I was finished listening. I informed her I needed personal room and left. When I arrived home there was a brief electronic message from Nathaniel inquiring if I was all right, that he had heard from Eugene I had been asking around about the matrimonial event. Information travels rapidly apparently. I telephoned him. I needed to speak to someone who was not deceiving me. He answered immediately. I requested him to recount precisely what he beheld at the wedding celebration. He delineated how he had been sitting with Eugene at table 12 when he observed a female at table 8 who appeared familiar. He stated he thought perhaps she was someone from college, but then he remembered the photographs I used to keep in my dormitory room, the one of my mother holding me as an infant. The manner she smiled in pictures, somewhat shy, somewhat melancholic. This woman possessed that identical smile. He stated he had mentioned it to Eugene, who informed him that was Sheila, that Troy's mother had extended an invitation to her because apparently Troy's parent and my mother had been comrades in the past. Eugene had not grasped the connection to me until Nathaniel explained. I inquired why he waited 3 years to inform me and he replied he did not delay 3 years. He stated he tried to introduce the subject casually the week following the nuptials, but I had been strange and aloof with him at the time. Then we ended our relationship 2 months later and he concluded it was no longer his business. Fair enough, I suppose. Then he asked if I had conversed with her and I informed him, indeed I had. He asked how it proceeded and I responded, honestly I have no understanding. A part of me desires to instruct her to remain in Harrisburg and leave me undisturbed. A part of me possesses approximately 1 million additional inquiries. He stated that made sense and that he was accessible if I required a sounding board. It was pleasant, uncomplicated, devoid of hidden agendas. The following morning I awakened to 17 unanswered telephone attempts from Anne and a voice recording from father requesting me to return his call urgently. I telephoned father first. He asked if I had encountered her and I verified I had. There was a prolonged period of quiet. Father uttered something I was not anticipating. He informed me Sheila had called him the previous night. After 13 years of silence, she had contacted him and stated she desired to be a component of our lives again. She wished to make amends. She wanted a relationship with her daughters and father. He had refused her. He stated he would permit her to see and if and wish that, but she needed to remain apart from me. He informed her I was managing well without her and she had inflicted sufficient injury. I asked him who gave him the authority to make that decision for me and he became silent. Then he stated he was endeavoring to protect me, just as he had consistently done. I informed him his protection had been falsehoods for 13 years and terminated the call. Now everyone is attempting to dictate this situation. Father wishes to maintain her distance and desires to facilitate some joyful reunion. Mother wishes absolution and a fresh start. But here is what no one is questioning. What is my desire? I am making progress toward it nonetheless. I am discovering the answer because there is something else. Something I have not revealed to anyone yet. When I was exiting the eatery, I observed an individual in the parking lot, the sapphire jacket man from Costco standing near a silver automobile watching the diner's entryway. And when I drove past him, I got a clear sight of his features. He looked exactly like my mother. Chapter 3: The Brother and the Barbecue. The latest information caused a stir, but the biggest revelation was yet to come. Okay, so the feedback on my most recent submission was extraordinary. Half of you presumed the blue-coated man was a private investigator. The other half believed I was losing my sanity. I telephoned my mother the morning after I saw him and stated we required an immediate discussion. She inquired if she could bring someone and I replied, fine, whatever. An hour later, she arrived at my residence with Sydney. He was tall for his age and appeared so apprehensive I thought he might actually collapse on my threshold. The first utterance he made was, apologies for acting inappropriately. He explained he had been trying to muster the nerve to introduce himself for multiple weeks, but kept backing out. That day at Costco he had finally chosen to do so. But then that aged woman had denounced him and he had panicked. I requested my mother to provide clarification, and she recounted the entire history. She had given birth to Sydney 2 years after abandoning us. His progenitor, Ronald, had departed when Sydney was an infant. She had reared him single-handedly in Harrisburg, which is only 90 minutes away. 90 minutes for 13 years. But here is the crux of the matter. As she was providing the explanation, I observed Sydney's expression. He looked as bewildered as I felt. This was not some malevolent scheme. These were merely damaged individuals who had made errors and were attempting to devise a solution for them. I inquired of Sydney what he wished to gain from this, and he replied, honestly, he just desired to get to know his sisters. He had grown up hearing anecdotes about us, seeing old photographs, knowing we existed, but never being able to meet us. He stated it had felt like possessing phantom siblings. Something about the way he articulated it affected me because I had possessed a phantom mother and it had been awful. Sydney had phantom sisters. We had all been haunted by people who were actually alive. I telephoned and instructed her to come to my apartment immediately. She arrived 20 minutes later, and when she saw Sydney, her eyes widened significantly. I performed the introduction and merely stared for a minute before exclaiming, holy heavens, we possess a brother. Sydney laughed nervously and said, yes, surprise. And posed a multitude of questions to him. Where did he attend education? What academic year was he in? Did he participate in athletic activities? What was his preferred academic subject? She was in full medical professional mode, trying to evaluate and systematize and comprehend everything. We ordered food from a local Chinese establishment and sat around my small living room table consuming and asking Sydney about his existence. He informed us he was in the 10th grade, that he enjoyed electronic games and courtball, that he had always yearned for siblings growing up. My mother sat quietly the entire duration, barely consuming, just watching the three of us talking. At one juncture I caught her weeping and she quickly dried her eyes and offered an apology. And asked her why she attended the nuptials if she knew she might be recognized. Our mother stated she had been extended an invitation by Troy's parent who had been her friend years ago. She debated for months before deciding to go. She asserted she simply wished to observe us as adults, even from across the room. She had planned to remain unseen, but Nathaniel had identified her. I asked Sydney if he had been cognizant of us his entire life, and he confirmed. Our mother had informed him when he was young that he had 2 older sisters she could not see. He had inquired why countless times, and she had always responded it was intricate, that she had made mistakes she could not rectify. And asked if our mother had been a commendable parent to him, and Sydney became quiet. Then he stated she had attempted her utmost, but she had been saddened frequently. He stated there were days she could barely exit her sleeping quarters, that she had worked relentlessly to provide for him, but emotionally she had been elsewhere. Our mother started crying more intensely then. She declared she was sorry, that Sydney deserved superior treatment, that we all deserve superior treatment. She stated she had spent 13 years living with what she had perpetrated, and it had ruined her from the inside out. And stood up and embraced her spontaneously, without hesitation. She stated, we cannot alter the past, but perhaps we can devise the future. I was not quite at that stage yet, but observing and embrace our mother while Sydney sat there looking like he might cry as well, I felt something alter. These were my kin. Damaged and complex, but mine. Over the next few weeks, Sydney became a standard fixture in our lives. Our mother would drive him down from Harrisburg on non-working days and we would spend time together. We went to a sporting event. We attempted this new locked-room puzzle venue in King of Prussia. We simply engaged in typical sibling activities and it felt strangely correct. Our mother joined us occasionally. At first it was awkward. None of us knew how to behave around her. But gradually we started comprehending who she actually was, not merely who we had fantasized about or recollected. She informed us about her role as an administrator in Harrisburg, about her residence with her feline button, about how she volunteered at a food distribution center on Saturdays because assisting people made her feel marginally less blameworthy about her own existence, and inquired about leaving father, and our mother finally recounted the complete narrative. She stated father had been controlling in ways that made her feel suppressed. He had desired to be aware of her whereabouts every single minute, whom she communicated with, what she expended funds on. She had felt like she could not breathe. That did not make the departure acceptable, but it made it more rational. She stated she had encountered Timothy at work, and he had made her feel acknowledged and appreciated in ways she had not felt for a period of years. She had engaged in a dalliance, and when father discovered it, the matrimony disintegrated. She had departed intending to gain distance and sort things out. But father had informed her if she wished to exit, she was completely out. She could not have it both ways. She had become distraught and fled. By the time she had calmed down sufficiently to think clearly, Dad had already informed us she was dead. When she had attempted to contact him to see us, he had menaced to make us despise her if she ever came near us again. I asked her why she believed him, and she responded because he had been so enraged and she had been so ashamed. She stated she had convinced herself we were better off without her. Sydney stated he had discovered letters she had composed to us over the years. Birthday greeting cards, holiday correspondence, missives about her existence. She had written them but never mailed them. Just retained them in a container in her storage area. Our mother brought the receptacle to Anne's place one Saturday. Inside were years of letters addressed to me and Anne, cards for birthdays we had celebrated without her, small gifts she had purchased but never given us, photographs she had collected from shared acquaintances. Reading those missives broke something within me because I could sense her suffering in every single word. She had not forgotten us. She had not moved on. She had been trapped in her own guilt and sorrow for 13 years. One communication from my 16th birthday stated she had driven past my secondary school that day and observed me laughing with friends. She wrote that I appeared content and beautiful and that perhaps she had made the correct choice staying away. I wept reading that because I had not been happy. I had been feigning, performing, trying to be acceptable for Dad and Anne, while internally I was still that 12-year-old girl who had lost her mother. Anne and I resolved we needed to converse with father, not to ambush him, but to assist him in comprehending what we were learning. We invited him to a meal at Anne's dwelling. When he entered and saw our mother sitting there, he halted abruptly. Anne stated we had requested him here to talk, all of us together, like adults. Dad took a seat rigidly. I informed him we had been spending time with mother and Sydney, and that we were starting to understand her perspective of what transpired. I stated we were not justifying her departure, but we were attempting to understand it. Dad stated there was nothing to comprehend. She forsook her kin. Our mother stated she had left a detrimental matrimony and then been intimidated into staying away. Dad stated that was falsehoods, that he had only threatened to disclose the truth about her. Sydney asked what truth, and father stated that she was a deceiver who selected another male over her offspring. Our mother stated yes. She had engaged in a secret relationship, but she had desired to resolve matters. And father had refused. He had issued her an ultimatum. Remain and accept his requirements or depart and never return. Dad stated that was not how it occurred. He stated she had been the one who left, who stepped out the door and did not look back. They disputed back and forth like this for a period and finally Anne yelled for both of them to cease. She stated it did not matter anymore who was correct about what transpired 13 years ago. What was significant was what we did now. I informed father that I cherished him and valued everything he had done rearing us single-handedly. But I also stated he had deceived us about mother being deceased and that had injured me in ways I was still coping with. I stated I needed him to accept that mother was going to be a component of our lives now. Dad looked at me for a prolonged moment. Then he inquired if that's genuinely what I desired. I responded affirmatively. Anne concurred too. He asked about Sydney and I stated Sydney was our brother and we wished a relationship with him. Dad nodded slowly and said okay. He would endeavor to accept it. Our mother stated she was not requesting father to forgive her or even to communicate with her. She simply desired a chance to know her daughters and for her son to know his sisters. Dad said fine, but he did not wish to be present for it. He would respect our choices, but he could not observe her playing happy family after everything she had done. That stung, but I understood. Some hurts do not heal merely because everyone wishes them to. Over the subsequent 2 months, things started to feel more customary. Sydney and our mother started coming to Philadelphia more frequently, sometimes remaining the weekend at a nearby lodging establishment so Sydney would not miss too much school. Having them visit regularly made everything simpler. The four of us, me and Sydney and our mother, started having routine Sunday evening meals. Occasionally at Anne's residence, sometimes at mine, sometimes at this eatery halfway between Philadelphia and Harrisburg. That became our customary meeting place. Our mother narrated stories about her early life, her parents who had both passed away years ago, what she had been like before she had evolved into the sorrowful woman we had known. Sydney recounted about growing up in Harrisburg, about his friends at school, about learning to prepare food because our mother worked late shifts, and recounted stories about raising me after mother left, how she had attempted to be like a secondary parent even though she was only 15. I informed them about the nocturnal terrors I had experienced for years. How I had been fearful to love anyone because what if they vanished too? One Sunday, our mother brought a photo collection she had retained hidden for a period of years. Images of me and as infants, as toddlers, family portraits from before everything fell apart. Sydney had never seen them and he gazed fixedly at the photographs as though he was attempting to commit them to memory. There was one image of all of us, mother, father, and me at the seashore. Anne was perhaps 4 and I was 2. We were constructing a structure of compressed sand and everyone was smiling. Our mother stated that was the final positive day she remembered before matters started deteriorating with father. And asked if she missed him and our mother replied occasionally. Not the irate version of him, but the male she had entered into matrimony with. The one who had made her laugh and had held her when she was afraid and had desired to construct a life with her. I understood then that my parents' marriage had not been entirely negative. There had been affection once before it transformed into something harmful and painful. 3 months after that initial meeting with Sydney, my mother performed something unexpected. She inquired if she could meet Nathaniel to express her thanks to him. She stated if he had not recognized her at the nuptials and informed me, we might never have located each other again. I telephoned Nathaniel and explained the entire course of events that had occurred. He stated he would be pleased to meet her. We all convened for midday meal in Center City. Me, Nathaniel, my mother, Anne, and Sydney. My mother thanked Nathaniel for speaking up, even though it had been awkward. She stated she had been terrified when he had identified her, but that it had resulted in her reclaiming her daughters. Nathaniel stated he was gratified it had resulted positively. Then he uttered something that surprised me. He stated he had always felt blameworthy for not saying something sooner, that perhaps if he had reached out right after the matrimonial event, matters could have been resolved more swiftly. I informed him everything had transpired in its appropriate timing, and that was acceptable. After the meal, Anne drew me aside and stated she wished to attempt something. She wished to invite mother and father to the same location and ascertain if they could have a respectful conversation. I stated that was an awful proposition, but Anne insisted. She stated we could not advance with our family divided. So we organized a collective outdoor meal at this green space near Anne's residence. We extended an invitation to everyone. Dad, mother, Sydney, Troy, even Nathaniel since he had been a part of the narrative. We reasoned in a public setting with other individuals present, Dad and Mom would be compelled to be civil. The day of the open-air meal I was so anxious I nearly cancelled. But Sydney sent me a brief message stating we could accomplish this, that it was time to make an effort. Dad appeared first, then Mother arrived with Sydney. They gazed at each other across the picnic area for a minute before Father walked over. He did not embrace her or anything, but he offered a greeting and inquired as to her welfare. She stated she was acceptable and asked about him. He stated he was fine, that retirement was suiting him well. It was uncomfortable and rigid, but it was some form of progress. We grilled meat patties and processed sausages. We engaged in disc throwing. Sydney challenged Father to a game of horseshoes, and Father actually produced a smile. At one instant, I observed Father and Mother standing near the grilling apparatus conversing quietly, not shouting, just talking. When I walked over, Dad was informing her about his new hobby, woodworking. Mom was stating she had always desired to acquire that skill. Dad said perhaps Sydney would be interested in learning sometime, that it was beneficial for youngsters to know how to construct items with their extremities. It was not absolution, but it was a commencement. As the sun began to set, we all sat around the picnic counter consuming melon. Anne stated we ought to do this routinely. That Sunday dinners were wonderful, but we required more substantial family gatherings too. Everyone agreed. Even Dad nodded. Our mother stated she wished to express something. She stated she knew she had wounded everyone at that counter in various manners. She stated she was apologetic for departing, for remaining distant, for all the years we had wasted. She stated she could not alter the past, but she desired to be a component of our futures if we would permit her. Dad did not state he forgave her, but he said we had all committed errors and that existence was too brief to remain angry indefinitely. He stated for the sake of his daughters and for Sydney, who was merely a child caught up in all this confusion, he was willing to attempt to proceed. Mom started weeping again, but this time they were joyful tears. Last week was my birthday, and for the first occasion in 13 years, my mother was present to commemorate it. She brought me a baked dessert she had prepared herself. Cocoa flavored with crimson fruit filling, which was my favorite as a youth. The fact that she remembered caused me to cry. We captured a family portrait that day. All of us, Father, Mother, and Troy, Sydney, and me. It was the first image of all of us together since I was 12. I printed that photograph and affixed it to my refrigeration unit. Sometimes I gaze at it and cannot believe this is my current existence. That my deceased mother is alive. That I possess a brother. That my fractured family is slowly reassembling itself. To that aged woman at Costco, thank you. You observed someone trailing me and you spoke out. You had no comprehension of what you were commencing, but because of you I regained my mother. I discovered a brother I was unaware existed. And to everyone who provided feedback on my posts, thank you for allowing me to express my feelings and process this absurdity. Summary of chapters. The encounter at the Emporium. the narrator is alerted by a stranger to a man following her in a store, later revealed to be her estranged ex-boyfriend Nathaniel, who has a shocking revelation to share about her supposedly deceased mother. The truth unravels. Nathaniel reveals he saw the narrator's mother, Sheila, at her sister Anne's wedding. The narrator confronts Anne, who confesses their mother did not die but abandoned them, and their father fabricated her death, leading the narrator to finally encounter her mother at a diner and learn the painful truth about her departure and father's threats. The brother and the barbecue. The narrator learns the mysterious man from the store is her half-brother, Sidney, born after her mother left. The family slowly begins to reconnect with Sidney and Sheila, eventually leading to a tense, but ultimately necessary, family barbecue with both parents, marking the first steps toward healing and rebuilding their complex, newfound family unit.